I know it happened on Saturday, but I didn't really think it would amount to anything. Kurt Busch lashes out at Bob Pockras, sports reporter at the Sporting News, and Pockras asked him a question about if his probation affected the way he drove the race against Justin Allgaier, and of course it did. That's an unreasonable question to ask. Obviously, you can't wreck a guy or rough a guy up if you're under probation, especially since it seemed like the parameters of this probation were pretty strict. And because Kurt Busch got a one-race suspension, and he's going to be suspended from the NASCAR events until June 13th. And his probation, which was set to end next month, will be extended until December. Kurt Busch issued a statement. He said, "I accept NASCAR's decision. I put them in a box. They had to take action, and it's my fault for putting them in this position." And it's good for him because it shows that he does realize that he's starting to make mistakes with this, and he needs to really be a professional. But the media, in this case, just kind of enticed him, and they know he's a loose cannon, and it seemed like this sports reporter really just felt that he could possibly get Busch to say something interesting, and obviously he did, stirred up some controversy. That's why I think maybe Kurt Busch would be better off if it were a different era, possibly, where there were less media coverage and attention, because he is a top 5 driver in my mind on the racetrack, talent-wise. And he is one of the best, I think, at his occupation out there. He has great talent. Him and his brother, they have great talent, and they're really great for the sport, the way they show their emotion, I believe. And emotion is really what keeps this sport alive. If you don't have those guys like Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch, sometimes Kevin Harvick, that do show that emotion, those are a couple of guys that do in a field that really is just full of vanilla guys, cookie cutter, good boys, I guess you could say, that just they're sponsor driven. It's a sponsor driven sport, and they just try to stay pretty and don't say anything stupid for their sponsors. They try to be professional about it, and it's a lot of the times you don't really see emotion in NASCAR, and that's what Kurt Busch really brings to the table. And if he were to exit this sport, which could be a possibility here with his ride with James Finch, that definitely wouldn't be good for the sport, I don't think. But I do think he'll always have a home at Kyle Busch Motorsports, whatever level that'll be at. I think his brother sees the talent in him and is willing to deal with him, as long as they can get sponsorship. Because like I said, it's a really financially driven world in NASCAR, and it's a very corporate sport. And without sponsors, you can't really do much. And Kurt Busch, he's full of empty insults. He's always been threatening people, and this is just another occasion where he lashed out at someone. In NASCAR, they've never really taken measures before on something like this, but I don't know, like I said, what the parameters of the probation were, if it was written up a certain way, like if he did anything with the media or anything on the track, something like that. I don't know what that was. Obviously, NASCAR thought this was something he should have been suspended for. I think if it was in writing that this was part of his probation, that he was not allowed to, verbally assault a media member, and that would lead to ultimately his suspension, that is obviously the right move by NASCAR. But I think if it wasn't, this is not something that is a suspendable offense. Possibly a fine, lay down a fine for Kurt Busch or Phoenix Racing. They're not doing too well funds right now. They don't have a sponsor. But I think suspension should be handed out for things like being in trouble with the law, competing under the influence of some drug or alcohol. Obviously, I think that should merit a suspension, if not a ban. Wrecking people under caution, like Kyle Busch did to Ron Hornaday. I don't mind if you're getting at it during the green flag and stuff's going on, but under caution, everything's supposed to be calm. Kyle Busch obviously got a suspension last year for that after wrecking Ron Hornaday in the Truck Series race. I believe it was at Texas when Hornaday was in contention for the championship. And I think that was well defended in NASCAR's opinion. I think that was the right move there. Or obviously I think cheating should merit a suspension as well. But just saying verbal things and not being a guy that's not going to carry out actions, obviously Kurt Busch at this point, we realize that he's made a lot of empty threats. and he hasn't done anything. And when a reporter just provokes him like that, that's something that I think NASCAR should look into. But like I said, if it was within the parameters of his probation and it was something he was not supposed to do, I think they made the right call here. But I don't think that if it wasn't something that should have been suspendable. He is a very talented driver, though, as I said. 24 wins in the Cup Series, and he obviously has that championship with Jack Roush. He's been in some very prestigious race teams with Jack Roush, the 97 car where he won that championship, and then with the 2 car where he's had a number of great seasons with Penske. And I think it's really funny how people always complain about how these guys in NASCAR are too clean cut. They're cookie cutter, just perfect guys, I guess you can say, and they don't really get out of line, and it makes the sport boring, people complain. When a guy like Kurt Busch or Kyle Busch shows some emotion, they make up these silly nicknames like Cryle Busch, and they say the Busch brothers should be out of the sport, they're not good for it. But that's not what people that aren't pure racing fans want to see. These guys attract people to the sport that wouldn't normally watch the sport otherwise. If it was just guys like Jeff Burton and Jeff Gordon and Matt Kenseth, those kind of guys that get into scraps only once in 10 years or something like that. You see guys like Jeff Gordon also throwing punches at Jeff Burton last year in that incident, and you don't see NASCAR suspending him for that. Assaulting another driver, you've seen that in the past with Jimmy Spencer, with Kurt Busch. That being a case where Spencer was suspended from races because he injured Kurt Busch by hitting him. But it happens to Jeff Gordon, and it's not as big of a deal for NASCAR, and they don't decide to suspend him. Granted, he was in the chase, but also Kyle Busch was in the chase when he was suspended for his action as well. So that's really something that I think is kind of interesting. It's a very image-driven sport, and you got to have your big names out there, and you got to seem like you have a governing body at the top, and that's what NASCAR did here. More things people complain about is how colorful Kurt Busch is on the radio. You hear drivers and pit crews swearing every week on the radio for stuff like just whether caution comes out at a certain time, there's a wreck, or there's a mistake on a pit stop. You hear guys just dropping F-bombs on the radio, and I've seen that just at racetracks. A guy cuts up in front of you, you call him whatever name you want to call him, and it's just kind of something that Kurt Busch maybe does more often, but every driver does it, and it's not recognized that they do that on the radio. You got Jimmy Johnson doing that, Greg Biffle's doing that, dropping F-bombs or whatever explicatives on the radio, and I just feel that people really hate on Kurt Busch a lot, and it's not necessarily something that Kurt Busch, he's obviously earned it, but it's not something that people should take so seriously. And the owner, James Finch, was on XM radio, and he said that it's very simple. He doesn't want Kurt Busch to wreck race cars, which he's done. He wants him to win races, and he wants him to be nice to people. So the first thing here that really comes to my mind is he says he doesn't want him to wreck race cars, so he obviously doesn't want him to get in the thick of things, but he wants him to win races. That's like telling a basketball player to get back down the court to defend in transition, but you're not allowed to run to get there. You got to walk so you don't injure yourself. And that's just something that's silly to me. If you're James Finch, you either tell your driver you want him to win races, or you want him to play it safe and just points race and keep these race cars. And with that, we don't even know if Kurt Busch is going to return to Phoenix Racing, because right now he's kind of on a race-by-race basis, and James Finch said that, obviously being the owner there at Phoenix Racing, he said that earlier in the season that one slip-up and Kurt Busch was going to be out of there. Obviously, we had the incident at Darlington. Kurt Busch continued racing at Phoenix Racing, the number 51 car, and now we have this incident with the reporter, which you guys already know my opinion on it. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Kurt Busch is going to end up in this Phoenix Racing car for the remainder of the year. And just some stats to go along with James Finch kind of, I guess it is kind of complaining about how his driver is not performing. Landon Castle, who drove the car last year, had an average finish of 28.84 in 32 races, so he didn't even make every race. I don't know if they went to every race last year. And his best finish was 12th, and he only completed 7 of the 7 races of the 32 he ran in. He ran the full, complete distance in only 7 races, which was roughly 21.9% of the races he was in, and he did not finish in 15.6% of those races as well while at Phoenix Racing. Now, Kurt Busch has an average finish this year of 23rd in his first 13 races. A best finish of 9th. He's 26th in the points right now, which is around within 40 points of Jeff Gordon and AJ Allmendinger and those kind of guys. And he was 23rd in points at his highest point in the season, and he's completed 23.1% of his races the full distance, which is higher than what Landon Castle completed in his time at Phoenix Racing, and he has lower DNF percentage than Landon Castle did in his time at Phoenix Racing last year. So James Finch is having a better year this year, but I think you might be placing a little too much on the shoulders of Kurt Busch, because obviously this equipment isn't as good as that Hendrick has, that Roush has. And we're seeing Michael Waltrip Racing coming into the picture here, Richard Petty Motorsports. Those guys are all getting top 10 finishes. And James Finch is running with inferior equipment, and he's expecting his guy to win races, but he doesn't want him to wreck cars. So especially when you have inferior equipment, you're going to want your guy to be racing, obviously. But James Finch really has to get, I'd say, his priorities in line with what he wants to do with this race team. I understand that he's not attracting sponsors right now, and that's another reason we might not see Kurt Busch in this race car for the remainder of the season. But, and also another thing with that is it's being early in the season, and Kurt Busch is still adjusting to this team. So he's already got better stats than the team had last year. However, he is just still getting in the flow with the team. With new teams, we usually see the team come together in the second half of the season and really start performing then. He's not even out of the chase picture at this point. If he just gets a win or two under his belt, which is definitely possible, this race team won at Talladega with Brad Keselowski, and it can do it again at a restrictor plate track, I believe. So Daytona we're looking at in the summer months. For this next race, though, that Kurt Busch is suspended, David Reutimann will be stepping into this 51 car, and Dave Blaney will be stepping into the 10 car that Dave Reutimann usually drives. Blaney usually drives the 36 car when he gets out there and races. And another thing, this is a great track for Kurt Busch. Pocono is. He finished 2nd and 3rd in the 2 races last year here, so this was a good chance for him to pick up a good finish. And another thing is, this is a completely new racing surface at Pocono in this upcoming week. So when he comes back, everyone else will have a race of this track under their belt, and he obviously will not because he is suspended. So the next time he's going to kind of be behind the power curve with the other guys. They're going to have a race under their belt the next time they get here, and when they return in August, and he's going to be there for the first time. And I think that that could really hurt him in that race, even though he's had success at this racetrack. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Kurt Busch situation here and the suspension handed down from NASCAR. Just if you guys are interested in some more sports talk, just subscribe to The Real Sports Talk. We'll bring you some great sports coverage. We got all sorts of sports, and I hope you guys like this video. So I'll have a video up for you, the pre-race video for Pocono. Obviously, it's a new racetrack, and so that'll be up early this weekend.